regulators, healthcare institutions, casinos, hotel operators, and boards of education, among others, providing guidance in obtaining approvals and incentives for a wide variety of projects. A few of his practice highlights include working on land use approvals, where he represents national and local companies and individuals in obtaining local zoning and state environmental approvals for residential, casino, hotel, retail, restaurant, healthcare, and telecommunication projects throughout New Jersey. Redevelopment and tax incentives is another of Nick's expertise, which includes assisting clients in obtaining redevelopment approvals and tax incentives. He negotiates agreements for redevelopment projects with the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, the EDA, the Casino Reinvestment Development Authority, CRDA, and local governments for redevelopment agreements and property tax incentive agreements. Nick is an adjunct instructor at Rutgers University Camden, member of the Greater Atlantic City Chamber Economic Development Committee, member of the Board of Trustees of Atlantic Cape Community College, where he has served as chair, vice chair, and treasurer. So Nick, always great to see you. Welcome. Vicki, turning the program back over to you.
Thank you, Michael. And likewise, always a pleasure to partner with our friends at the Atlantic City Regional Chamber. And I'd like to thank Donna Vasir at Cooper Levinson for working with us to put on this great program talking about the New Jersey Economic Recovery Act of 2020, the Aspire program. And I would like to give a welcome to two of our county commissioners, Jeff Pearson and Will Morey, who've joined us. And I also see Barbara Jones from the Middle Township Chamber. Thank you for joining us here today, Barbara, and all of our members of the business community who are here with us today. I'm going to welcome everybody to place your comments and questions in the chat. And we can also use the raised hand feature at the end of the program. But if you have questions as we're going along in the program, please use the chat feature so you keep those in mind, and we'll get to those at the end of the program. It's my pleasure now to introduce the second of our presenters, Rebecca C. Lafferty. Rebecca is an associate of Cooper Levinson and a member of the Gaming and Casino Law, Land Use and Zoning and Planning, Commercial Litigation, and Governmental Services practice groups. Rebecca is based in the firm's Atlantic City office and focuses her practice on all aspects of the gaming industry and various land use issues, including commercial development, redevelopment, real estate, and litigation. She is also involved in the representation of governmental entities in various capacities. Additionally, Rebecca has experience in commercial litigation, where she has been involved in representing automobile manufacturers in franchise litigation. While at Widener University School of Law, Rebecca worked for the Environmental and Natural Resources Clinic, representing special interest groups in environmental matters. She also served internships with the Honorable William E. Nugent, JSC, and the Honorable Carol E. Higbee, PJCV, in the Superior Court of New Jersey, as well as with the New Jersey Attorney General's Office in the Environmental Enforcement section. Rebecca is very active in professional and community organizations, serving as treasurer of the Atlantic County Bar Association, a member of the Greater Atlantic City Chamber of Commerce, and as solicitor of the Atlantic County Mayors Association and county coordinator for the Atlantic County Mock Trial Program, just to name a few. She was named to the New Jersey Super Lawyer List as a rising star since 2017, Top 40 Under 40 in Atlantic County, and United Way Campaign Coordinator of the Year. So with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Nick and Rebecca, and hope everyone really gets a lot out of this program, because I understand it's quite in depth. So.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Mike. And I want to acknowledge Rebecca, my colleague, who has put a lot of time into trying to understand this legislation. It is complex, 249 pages. We understand the legislature is actually going to do a cleanup bill to make some technical corrections in it. It covers a wide variety of programs, I think 7 in total. Today, we're going to focus on Aspire and Emerge. Rebecca, though, is going to give an overview of the overall legislation so people can see the breadth of it. It's pretty encompassing. Just by way of background, until I think July of 2019, New Jersey had 2 former significant redevelopment programs, ERG, the Economic Redevelopment Growth Program, which was essentially a tax increment financing program whereby a new project would be financed by incremental taxes generated by the project. The developer would get some of that money. And also Grow New Jersey, which was a job creation and retention project to keep jobs in New Jersey. Those programs sunset in July of 2019. So New Jersey did not have significant incentive legislation until January of 2021. The legislature adopted the New Jersey Economic Recovery Act of 2020 on December 21st. The governor signed it January 7th. Currently, the New Jersey EDA, as I understand it, is working on the regulations that will govern the programs and the application process. I am told as of a few days ago, probably sometime in summer when the programs will actually roll out. The legislature allocated, at least initially, $11.5 billion for the program. Program runs for 6 years till 2027, although it can be extended. This program, unlike some of the prior programs, is generally a first come, first served. So sooner the applications are in, the money's limited. Under some of the other programs, such as ERG, if you qualified, you got the approval and you got the rebate of sales tax from your project. That's not the case here. So here, the sooner you get the application in, the more likely you'll get funding for your project. So I'm going to have Rebecca now just give an overview of the legislation generally, each of the programs, and then I'm going to focus on the Aspire program. Aspire replaced the ERG program, but unlike ERG, it doesn't rely on a sales tax rebate. Instead, it's based upon tax credits for economic development projects, residential projects, and mixed-use projects. Rebecca is then going to talk about Emerge. Emerge replaces Grow New Jersey, is New Jersey's new version of job creation and job retention program. Both programs have a lot of nuances to it, but the old programs also had a lot of requirements. Many developers successfully received the approvals and have received the actual benefits, the incentives. Some are still getting incentives because the incentives run for 10 to 20 years, depending on the program, the payouts. One important point for these programs is that the developer must make, for Aspire and Grow and Emerge, must make the investment first. There's no upfront money. The money comes after you've made the investment, satisfied the requirements, and then you start getting the incentive money on the back end from the state. So having said that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Rebecca Lafferty, to talk about the legislation generally.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Michael and Vicki, for having us here today. Like Nick mentioned, I'm going to be speaking first, just a brief summary of some of the other programs that are included in the legislation. And the information I'm going to be giving is just quick overviews. Obviously doesn't include everything, or we probably would be here all day. And these are in no particular order. The first one is the Historic Property Reinvestment Program. It's a $50 million tax credit program for the rehabilitation of historic properties in the state of New Jersey. In order to receive tax credits through this Historic Property Reinvestment Program, a project must rehabilitate a property that is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, approved by the State Historic Preservation Officer, or designated historic through a municipal ordinance. It must also be an income producing property, demonstrate that a project financing gap exists, and include a developer who has an equity participation of at least 20%. Eligible projects under this program can receive tax credits worth 40% of total cost up to a project cap of $4 million. And the credit is claimed upon the completion if it's a 24-month rehabilitation period, or if it's a phased project at the end of a distinct phase, and that would be a 60-month rehabilitation period. Next would be the Main Street Recovery Finance Program Act. And this act provides grants, loans, and loan guarantees to eligible small businesses. In order to receive the Main Street Recovery Fund, a microbusiness must have less than $1 million in annual revenue according to its most recent tax return, have fewer than 10 full-time employees, and then small businesses must also satisfy a few additional requirements, in addition to what I just stated. The grant requirements will be the grants applications will be evaluated based on rules adopted by the EDA, which will include a business's benefit to the community, enhancement of job creation, and promotion of economic development in communities severely affected by COVID-19. 40% of the funds in the Main Street Recovery Act will be available to micro businesses certified by the state as minority or woman owned. And the EDA may dedicate up to 10% of the total amount of grants to provide technical assistance grants to micro businesses. For loans are available to community development finance institutions, zone development corporation located within a municipality with a population greater than 100,000, or a nonprofit lender with at least 10 years of experience lending to micro businesses. Loans made to community development finance institutions and zone development corporations must be used to strengthen capital structures, leverage additional debt capital, and increase lending and investing in economically disadvantaged communities. Loans to micro businesses can be used for capital improvements, employee training, salaries for new positions, and pay for day-to-day operating expenditures, which would include payroll, rent, utilities, insurance, and purchases of goods and services. And the interest rate on these loans will be based on market conditions prevailing at the time. And it's possible that EDA might forgive loans at their discretion. The next, and actually there's a $50 million program limit for that program. Okay, the next one is the New Jersey Innovation Evergreen Fund. And this is a partnership with the private sector that will raise and invest funds in New Jersey-based companies to address New Jersey's shortfalls in venture capital funding and create the conditions necessary for entrepreneurs to succeed. The EDA will raise funds for the program over 5 years by auctioning off $60 million in tax credits annually to corporations registered to do business in New Jersey. The proceeds of the auction will establish the fund. Auction bids will be evaluated according to price and strategic commitments that the bidding company makes to support the program's portfolio companies and the state's broader innovation ecosystem. Professional and institutional venture capital investors can apply for formal review. Those that meet the EDA's criteria will have access up to $10 million per year to invest in New Jersey's based companies in innovative industries. The funded companies will receive support from the corporations that purchase tax credits through the auctions. The EDA will return dividends and returns on investments to the fund, making it self-sustaining or, quote, evergreen, hence the name of the program. Some investment returns may also be paid to the state's general fund. In order to purchase tax credits during the auction, a company must request at least $1 million in tax credits, bid at least 85% of the requested dollar amount of the tax credits, agree to provide mentorship, networking, and collaboration opportunities to qualified businesses that receive funding under the program, and commit to serving on the advisory board for the fund. To receive an investment through the program, a business must be registered to do business in New Jersey, have principal business operations located in New Jersey, and intend to maintain principal business operations in the state after receiving a qualified investment under the program, be engaged in a targeted industry, and employ fewer than 250 people. In order to access the funds, venture capital firms must be qualified by the EDA, demonstrate a minimum of $10 million assets under the management at time of the certification, and have no fewer than 2 principals employed to direct the qualified investment of capital, and those principals must have at least 5 years of money management experience in the venture capital or private equity sectors on the date the determination for certification is made. In any given year, the EDA may not auction off tax credits if more than $15 million is available to EDA from money received from a prior auction. The EDA will auction up to a total of $300 million in transferable tax credits with an annual cap of $60 million during each of the first 6 years after the program begins. Qualified investments up to $5 million may be made from the fund. And businesses that utilize intellectual property that is core to their business model and was developed at a New Jersey-based college or university are considered a university spinoff business, or are certified by the state as a minority business or a woman's business, can qualify for an investment up to 6.25 million instead of 5 million. The next program is the Community Anchored Development Program, which allows the EDA to facilitate and partner in large-scale development projects with desirable employment and geographical characteristics that impact the broader community. Institutions in the areas of education, healthcare, culture, community development, and economic development can use proceeds from the sale of state tax credits to act as investors in targeted development projects. To be eligible, you must be located in the New Jersey State Opportunity Zone or result in the economic expansion of a targeted industry in a metropolitan planning area or municipality with a municipal revitalization index score of greater than 50, involve a minimum investment of $10 million, provide a net benefit to the state, and the applicant must have a letter of support from the governing body. The EDA will create evaluation criteria for a competitive evaluation process based on the project's projected community impact and strategic significance to the state. The eligibility period may not exceed 10 years. The program will provide a base award of $5 million that can be increased to a project cap of 40% of the project or $75 million. Next is the Food Desert Relief Program. And the Food Desert Relief Program provides financial incentives to grocery stores, supermarkets, and food retailers in order to access food in food insecure communities throughout New Jersey. The incentives include tax credits, loans, grants, and other technical assistance. Moving on, there is a program for Brownfields Development Incentive. It's a $15 million per year project-based tax credit, and the program provides a one-time transferable tax credit to incentivize environmental remediation, abatement, and demolition activities that will allow for the redevelopment of brownfield sites for commercial, retail, or mixed-use development or expansion. Next is the PPE manufacturing.
Rebecca, can I just interrupt real quick? I just want people to know that we have these outlines available. I'm not sure how we'll make them available to you, but we'll make them available. So you don't have to take copious notes today. We have an outline of the overall programs, the Aspire and the Emerge. But sorry, Rebecca, continue, please.
That's okay. The PPE manufacturing tax credit makes $10 million and investment tax credits per year available to businesses that invest in the production of PPE during the tax years 2020, 2021, and 2022. And in fact, there are bonus tax credits for facilities located in Atlantic, Burlington, Cape May, Cumberland, Gloucester, Ocean, and Salem counties. There is the New Jersey Ignite Act, which is actually separate and apart from the 2018 New Jersey Ignite Act, and that provides grants to NJEDA approved collaborative workspaces for the benefit of early stage innovation economy businesses that locate in New Jersey. And now I'm going to turn it over to Nick to talk about Aspire.
Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, Aspire, I think has, I've used it for a number of clients for economic development projects, whether restaurant projects, hotel projects, entertainment projects. It's a great tool under the old ERG program. So as I mentioned, the ERG program was essentially a rebate of incremental sales tax generated by an economic development project. Aspire changes the way that works in that it provides tax credits. And we'll get to how the tax credits work further down. So first issue is who's eligible. Eligibility is generally by location, although certain types of projects, transformative, certain other projects that are favored, targeted projects that are favored by the state are eligible. But in general, must be located in Planning Area 1 or Metropolitan, Planning Area 2, Suburban, or a designated center. For Planning Areas 2 and designated centers, you must be within 1/2 mile of the midpoint with bicycle and pedestrian connectivity of a New Jersey Corporation, Port Authority, Transit Corporation or Port Authority, Trans-Hudson Corporation rail station. So just that criteria alone limits the applicability of the legislation. So for example, Wildwood City qualifies because it's a designated center. It still has to meet the criteria in terms of distance from a transit hub. Atlantic City qualifies because it's in Planning Area 1. EDA has a mapping tool. It's not up yet for these programs, but under the state plan, you can see, if you Google it, New Jersey State Plan, and they have an interactive map that allows you to determine whether your area is in a planning area 1, planning area 2, or designated center. So you can see that. Now, eventually, EDA on its website will have a more specific, you'll be able to put an address in and find out what programs it's eligible for. We checked yesterday. It's not yet running for Aspire or Emerge, but that will come in time. So assuming you're in a proper location for an Aspire program, then you have to demonstrate that the project needs the incentive. The state is not interested in incentivizing projects that are financially viable on their own. So the test that is in the statute and was previously used under the ERG Act is this concept of a financing gap, meaning that under a typical financing scenario, say 20% equity, which is the minimum required to qualify for Aspire, and 80% debt, despite good faith efforts by the developer is unable to secure enough financing to have the project commence. And the financing commitment is based on a non-recourse basis, so you don't have to sign away personally to meet the test. The other way EDA looks at whether or not there's a financial need for the incentive is to apply the test of whether or not the project has a below market rate of return. The EDA provides benchmarks depending on the business. So if it's a hotel project, there's one rate of return. If it's an entertainment project, a different rate of return. And for example, years ago in Atlantic City, they were using a 30% rate of return as the required market rate of return for a casino project. Now, that's high, but given the risk back in 2008, 2009, when they had that test, that was the market. People were not interested in developing at that time because of the industry was declining. But so the rates of return will vary. So if the project, based upon a typical financing scenario, and reasonable estimates of sales growth, whatever, has a below market rate of return, the idea of the Aspire program is to provide additional yearly cash to the developer over an up to 15-year period for commercial projects and up to a 10-year period for residential projects to meet the financing gap. So that's that's one test. So if the project is viable, you will not get approved. You have to prove the EDA that the project's not viable. There's another side to that coin though. If it pencils out so poorly that even with the ERG, it would not, with the Aspire grant, it would not be viable, then you could also be denied because the project is so underwater from a financial cash flow standpoint that they determined that it's not a viable project even with the incentive. So if it's too low, you could also, if your rate of return is too low, you could also be denied. EDA goes through a vigorous analysis to verify the financing gap or the below market rate of return. They have the right to bring in an outside consultant. And if they do bring in an outside consultant, the applicant has to pay that. In some cases, we've had clients have to pay $30,000 to $35,000 fees to compensate the EDA for its outside consultant. In addition to that, construction cannot begin at the site before project approval. However, the developer applicant is permitted to expend soft costs prior to project approval. If you start construction, that tells the EDA that you don't really need the money if you're able to start the project. So if you're thinking of this program, it's important that you understand that if you start any site work in general, that will disqualify you from approval. Now, the statute does permit a project to be undertaken in phases, so you can get approval for one phase and then get approval for another phase. The project, another requirement is that the project must comply with minimum environmental and sustainability standards. There is a green building requirement, and there is it's right now a 14-page set of requirements. for environmental sustainability, such as, high efficiency lighting, high efficiency heating and cooling, and those kind of things. From what I understand from the engineers who work on these, it's not an onerous standard. It's things that most developers would use anyway in new projects. Tricky part is if you're renovating part of a building. At one point years ago, there was a question if part of a project's renovated and it's a very large building, does the environmental standards have to apply, the efficiency standards apply to the overall building or just the portion that is being renovated and that is getting the incentive? EDA came down that the standards only apply to the new work that's covered by the incentive, because if you had to go back and totally upgrade an older building, it may not be worth the incentive anymore. So that wasn't practical. So I think that was a good policy decision. The project's also subject to affirmative action requirements. What this has meant in general is that in construction contracts and subcontractor contracts, there's a requirement that the contractor make a good faith effort to hire, to employ the affirmative action requirements that EDA imposes. There's requirement for reporting. There's no specific number of persons that have to be hired to meet the affirmative action requirement, but a good faith effort must be made. From talking to contractors, this has not really been a significant issue in terms of the paperwork. A number of contractors are familiar with the reporting requirements and has not seemed to be a significant issue. Another requirement, and this catches some potential applicants by surprise, is that with one limited exception, all EDA projects require the use of prevailing wage. So in the analysis of the benefits of the incentive versus the project cost, sometimes developers decide not to proceed with the incentive because of the prevailing wage requirement. Now, the one exception to prevailing wage is if a developer is renovating is a tenant in a building and leases less than 55% of that building, and the landlord undertakes the renovation work. In that instance, there is an exception to the prevailing wage requirement. That's pretty limited. Prevailing wage is taken very seriously at the EDA. So for example, even if you're doing an office complex and you're doing those cubicles for office workers, the assembly of those cubicles is required to be done by under prevailing wage. Now, prevailing wage is not the same thing as union, but the prevailing wages are based upon a local union wages in the area, but you're not required to necessarily deal directly with the union, but you have to pay those wages. And I also saw some information if you're bringing in prefabricated caseworks, for example, the factory where it's made has to be prevailing wage too. So I don't have all the detail on that, but I was reading that and talking to EDA about that in connection with another project. So beware of those requirements. You have to document the payment of prevailing wage, and you have to prove it to EDA to qualify. Now, as I mentioned, there's a requirement that the developer have 20% equity participation. Equity can include land, for example, cash into the deal, but also can include the value of soft cost, engineering fees, architectural fees, other professional fees. Soft cost, though, can't be more than 20% of the total project cost. Now, there is, as I mentioned, a residential component to Aspire. So certain residential programs, depending on the municipality, can get some funding for a residential project, but in that case, the project has a 20% set aside for affordable housing, with some exceptions for if the municipality has substantive certification or a court order where it's not required to have that 20% set aside. But in general, you're doing a residential project with Aspire funds, you have to have the 20% set aside. And I'm not going to get into too much deal about the specific requirements, but I do want to talk about how the tax credits work monetarily. So assuming your project's awarded the tax credit, The tax credits can be up to 45% of project costs with a maximum of $32 million. However, in certain municipalities, it could be up to 50 million. So for example, Atlantic City, the threshold is 50 million and actually 50% of project costs. But in general, it's 45% of project cost up to a maximum of $32 million. Tax credits then, so assuming you get the approval, you build the project, you've complied with all the requirements and EDA signs off. Upon project completion, you start getting the tax credits. So when a commercial project, the tax credits are paid over a 15-year period and a residential project over a 10-year period. So this is how the tax credits work under this program and other New Jersey programs. These are tax credits against New Jersey corporate business tax and other state taxes. Most developers don't have enough state income tax to actually utilize the credits. What they are permitted to do under this legislation and under prior programs is to sell the tax credits to businesses that can use the tax credits. So for example, we have significant amount of pharmaceutical companies in New Jersey and other high-tech businesses. There's approximately, the last number I got from EDA was over $4 billion per year of New Jersey business tax liability. So if you're awarded, say, $15 million of tax credits, you're paid out $1 million a year of tax credits. You're literally on a year-by-year basis, the state will give you a tax credit certificate for $1 million. If you can't take advantage of it because you don't have enough tax liability, you can transfer that certificate to a corporation in New Jersey that has the liability, and they will use it against their taxes. Now, the key point here is that that tax credit, once it's sold, will not sell it, dollar for dollar. There will be a discount. The purchaser will want to buy it for less than $1. If not, there's no reason for them to buy it. They would just pay the full tax. So the statute allows the tax credit to be sold for no less than 75%, and in some cases 85% of face value. The marketplace, however, has been about 92 to 93 cents on the dollar. So for example, I sell $1 million, Mike, I have a tax credit for $1 million. I sell it to XYZ Corporation. They'll give me $920,000, but they'll get $1 million off their taxes. So they're essentially getting an 8% discount off of their taxes, and the developer gets the 92 cents, and that's the incentive that it's been awarded. So key points. Another key point is the application process ends March 1 of 2027, but because of the amount of money in the program for all these programs is limited to $11.5 billion, excuse me, it is unlikely that there will be money left by 2027. So sooner the better. And one other key requirement, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is the net benefit test. So in addition to the need of the project to need the incentive in order to be economically viable, the state analyzes whether or not the project will have a net benefit to the state in terms of new tax revenue from the job creation and other state taxes paid. It's a complicated analysis they use, and under the Aspire program, the net benefit test is left to the EDA to figure out how to apply that. So we've had net benefit tests before under ERG and GROW, but it's been, I think it's going to be reformulated under this program. So I don't know what that's going to look like at this point in time, but essentially EDA has to reach a determination that the net benefits from your project to the state of New Jersey exceed the value of the tax credits. And what they'll do is they'll discount the benefits over a 15-year time horizon, and they'll discount the tax credits to present value. They've used in the past a discount rate of about 6%, but they try to get it so you're comparing apples to apples, and the benefit has to exceed the value of the credits on a discounted basis, or you will not qualify. Now, what they can do is they can reduce the amount of the credits awarded such that by the time, if you keep pushing down the credits, the benefits don't really change. So you keep pushing down the credit amount until the benefits exceed the credit amounts. So that can cause what you think is a higher award to be reduced to a lower award. That happens from time to time. The developer, and I've had applicants, they'll do their own calculation of what they think the net benefits are. EDA sometimes agrees, sometimes doesn't agree, depends on the assumptions that are made in this formula. The formula has evolved over time. It has not been the same under the old program. And so I assume it's going to evolve again, and we'll just see how it works out. So key things, again, on the program, you have to be in an eligible area. You have to show that the project has a below market rate of return or can't get financed. You have to meet the net benefit test, affirmative action requirements, prevailing wage requirements, green building requirements. And then there is the CEO certification, very important. EDA requires, and they're very strict on this, that the CEO sign a certification that all the statements made are true under penalty of law, perjury, potential criminal sanctions if CEO lies. And EDA in the last couple of years makes certain that CEOs are on critical calls, critical emails. They've had apparently in the past CEOs say they didn't understand the program. They signed it because they thought they complied. They didn't understand all the requirements. So EDA, very careful now to make sure that the decision makers of the company are in the loop, completely in the loop. So there's no ability at a later date to say we didn't understand what the requirements were. So that CEO certification, I'm told, has caused some applicants to walk away from projects after they were, submitted, and then they realized that if they were in legal jeopardy if they continued with the application. So very important to submit truthful information, truthful estimates of what the project's going to do. And there's also a requirement I'll just mention under certain circumstances, and this is new, it's not something I've seen before, for a community benefits agreement. So with that, I'll wrap up. I know Rebecca is now going to talk about Emerge, and then hopefully we'll have time for a few questions. Rebecca?
Thanks, Nick. As Nick mentioned earlier, the Emerge program is a per job tax credit incentive program, very similar to the previous Grow New Jersey program. And the program is administered by the EDA, and the purpose is to encourage economic development, job creation, and the retention of jobs that are in danger of leaving the state. And the program provides tax credits for up to 7 years. The program cap is $1.1 billion a year for 6 years, and that actually is a combined cap for Emerge and Aspire together. The eligibility requirements, the applicant must demonstrate that the business will make, acquire, or lease a minimum capital investment at a qualified business facility. And a qualified business facility is defined as a building or complex of buildings and all machinery and equipment located within those buildings used in connection with the operation of a business that is not engaged. That's important, not engaged in final point of sale retail business at that location. And there is one exception to that, and that is a tourism destination project in the Atlantic City Tourism District. So what are the minimum capital investment requirements? It's $20 per square foot of gross leasable area for rehabilitation of existing industrial, warehousing, logistics, or research and development for continued similar use. $60 per square foot of gross leasable area for new construction of industrial, warehousing, logistics, or research and development. $40 per square foot of gross leasable area for rehab for existing portion of premises for uses other than what I just previously described. And they also call this rehabilitation office space. And $120 per square foot of gross leasable area for the new construction of a portion of the premises for uses other than those I already mentioned, and they're calling that new construction office space. There's no minimum capital investment for small businesses if the applicant demonstrates its intent to remain in the state for the commitment period. A small business is defined as a business engaged in a targeted industry with fewer than 100 employees as determined at the time of application. It does not include eligible costs incurred prior to submission of an application or improvements performed by a landlord. An applicant must demonstrate that the business will create or retain a certain number of full-time jobs. Part-time jobs are not eligible, and you may not combine part-time positions to create a full-time position to qualify for the program. Independent contracting or consulting jobs are only eligible if certain requirements are met. The minimum number of new or retained full-time jobs for small businesses, it's 25% growth of workforce with new full-time jobs within the eligibility period. For targeted industries that do not qualify as a small business, it's 25 new full-time jobs, and any other business is 35 new full-time jobs. And there are a couple of caveats for businesses that will retain 500 and 1,000 full-time jobs. Just to reference real quick, I've mentioned target industries twice, and the list of what that includes is advanced transportation and logistics, advanced manufacturing, aviation, autonomous vehicles, clean energy, life sciences, hemp processing, information and high technology, finance and insurance, professional services, film and digital media, non-retail food and beverage businesses, including food innovation and other innovative industries that disrupt current technologies or business models. Applicant must also demonstrate that the qualified business facility is capable of accommodating more than half of the business's new or retained full-time employees, and at least 80% of the full-time jobs will be spent in the state of New Jersey. The applicant must be located in a qualified incentive area, which is defined by the statute as including a wide range of areas. In order to receive the emerged tax credits, the EDA must determine that the capital investment resulting from the award and the resultant creation and or retention of full-time jobs will yield a net positive benefit to the state. And that means at least 400% of the requested tax credit allocation amount based on the award of tax credits, the capital investment, and the creation and retention of new full-time jobs that's the net benefit, and the net positive benefit for businesses in a distressed municipality or a transit hub municipality must be at least 300,000, and then it would be 200,000 for businesses in a government restricted municipality or for a mega project. The applicant must demonstrate that the award of tax credits will be a material factor in the decision to create or retain full-time jobs. And the applicant must commit to staying at the business facility for 1.5 times the eligibility period. The applicant, similar to what Nick was saying, the applicant must comply with minimum environmental and sustainability standards, affirmative action requirements, and they're also subject to prevailing wage requirements. The applications must be submitted prior to March 1st, 2027, and the applicant must execute a non-binding letter of intent detailing the amount and terms and conditions of the tax credits. The applicant must submit the following items as part of the application, and the EDA will independently verify them. And that is the full economic analysis of all locations under consideration by a business, all lease agreements, ownership documents, or similar documentation for current in-state locations, and all lease agreements, ownership documents, or similar documentation for potential out-of-state location alternatives. And also, like Nick was saying with Aspire, there is a community benefits agreement that's required. In this case, it's for projects for a total project cost equal to or exceeding $10 million. Tax credit amounts. The Emerge program awards are calculated on an annual per job basis with base credits ranging from $500 to $4,000 per job. Gross amounts will be reduced if the median salary of a new and retained full-time job is less than the existing median salary for the county in which the facility is located. No tax credits will be awarded if the median salary of a new and retained full-time job is 30% or more below the existing median salary for the county in which the facility is located. Eligible retained jobs are calculated at 50% of the value of new jobs. So these base amounts of tax credits that I'm going to tell you now are for new jobs, so you would just reduce them by 50% for retained jobs. $4,000 a year minimum and $8,000 a year maximum if you're located within a government restricted municipality or a mega project. $3,500 a year minimum and $6,000 a year maximum if you're located in an enhanced area. $3,000 a year minimum and $5,000 a year maximum located in a distressed municipality. $2,500 a year minimum and $4,000 a year maximum located in a qualified opportunity zone or employment and investment corridor. And $500 a year minimum and $3,000 a year max located in other eligible areas. There are also additional bonus amounts available. I'm not going to list them all. but there are all kinds of bonus credits that you can tack on to your base credit to hit your maximum allowable tax credit. You should know that the EDA can reduce the size of an award or recapture tax credits if a business reduces the number of full-time employees below the amount specified in the statute or amounts specified in the project agreement. The EDA may reevaluate the net positive benefit and reduce the size of an award accordingly if any annual report provides that the number of full-time employees or the salaries thereof have been reduced by more than 10% from the last annual report. The tax credits work the same way that Nick explained, where you can utilize them for your own use, or you can sell or sign them for not less than 85% for the value of the credits. And in the case of Emerge, you can also surrender them to the division for 90% for the value of the credits. Like Nick mentioned, keep in mind that all the rules and regulations have not been promulgated yet, and they're not expected till probably at least this summer, but we expect them to be at least somewhat similar to the Grow New Jersey program. And I think Nick mentioned earlier the mapping tool, and we're hopeful that that'll be up on the website soon, so that you can just click on the program you're interested in. You can click on the mapping tool and it'll show you what areas are included and are eligible for the Emerge program.
Thanks, Rebecca. We have about 6 or 7 minutes for questions. I just want to point out one key part of Emerge is that it's non-retail businesses with a couple of exceptions. So, for example, at a city like Wildwood, which has a lot of seasonal work, seasonal jobs, or Atlantic City, the jobs program, now Emerge, typically doesn't work well because only year-round full-time jobs count for credits, whereas under the old ERG or now Aspire, it's not based upon employment, it's based upon the project and the benefits to the state. So even if those benefits are concentrated in the summer, it's annualized in terms of how the state would look at the project. So, but definitely the job Emerge is definitely useful for, high-tech jobs and other jobs like that, we're trying to attract to this area, aviation support jobs, for example. So with that, we're available for any questions. I know we covered a lot of material, and we'll probably do a follow-up as we get more information about the regulations.
Thank you so much, Nick and Rebecca. It is a lot of information to digest, and we appreciate the detail coming. We did record the session, which will be provided to everyone. Once we dig into all of this, I'm sure more questions will be coming in the future as well. We do have a question here in the chat. I'll start, and Michael, maybe we can tag team a little bit. The first question is, under Aspire, this is from Mike Meyer. Can you explain the clawback provision? If your project achieves better cash flow than original pro forma, under Emerge, are small businesses subject to the same 200% to 400% net benefit test, even though there is no CapEx requirement?
Under Emerge, the net benefit is not specifically, there's no percentage. Emerge surprised me because it had the 400% requirement. There used to be, under the old programs, the net benefit had to be 110% of the value of the credits. That's been abandoned. Emerge looks like it doesn't have any specific requirement. So we'll have to see what the EDA comes up with. No specific requirement in the statute. Emerge does have that 400% requirement, and I think the 200% requirement in the statute. So EDA is not going to be able to lower that or change that, but they'll come up with the way it's calculated. And I also note that under Aspire, in certain municipalities, the EDA is permitted or required to reduce the net benefit calculation to benefit developers in certain municipalities in the state. I hope that answers the question.
And I'll just also remind, if someone would like to raise their hand and ask their question themselves, we can certainly do that as well.
And I see actually also from Mike Meyer, whether or not land value is included in the project costs. You know, I've looked that up in the past, and the way it's defined in the statute, honestly, was not crystal clear to me. I'm waiting to get some more clarity on that from the EDA as we move forward. So I don't think it counted under the old program, actual land acquisition costs. So it may not count, but remains to be seen.
Seeing any other questions pop up in the chat? Don't see any raised hands.
Vicki, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes my my microphone fades out, but I said I don't see any other questions in the chat or any raised hands. Michael, any comments from you?
Tremendous program. I mean, it is an unbelievable amount of information. Some of these programs can be really beneficial to our region. Certainly looking forward to more information when they come out. But I think, you know, Vicki and I agree that we're very, very fortunate to have partners like Cooper Levinson, Donna, Nick, Rebecca, and the rest of your team to help us, to guide us through some of these incentive packages. It's incredibly detailed. There's a lot of information, more information to come, but we greatly appreciate you partnering with us today.
We appreciate the opportunity. Hopefully we gave a flavor of this very expansive Recovery Act legislation, some of the areas it covers. And again, today is not meant to be able, you know, to go and file an application. It's not even ready, but it's certainly not enough information, but at least you can think about, hopefully, business owners, developers, that something might be available for them, whether it's under Main Street or Aspire or Emerge. There is a lot, and I want to thank Rebecca for really diving into the statute. It is a very difficult read, believe me. So anyway, thanks, Rebecca, and thanks to both chambers for having us today.
Yes, thank you very much for having us.
Michael, any upcoming programs you'd like to announce?
Well, actually, this afternoon, we're partnering with Stockton, the Light Institute, on Destination Cannabis, Insights for New Jersey Hospitality and Tourism. So we've got some presenters from across the country that are talking about how cannabis has impacted their region from a tourism and hospitality standpoint. So we're looking forward to that program. Certainly with the legislation coming through quickly, we should get some interesting comments, but we've got well over 100 people registered for it, and about 40 of them signed up within the past day. So it'll be very interesting, but that's today at 1 o'clock. Vicki and I are certainly in conversation talking about a networking mixer sometime in the spring for the two of us. The last in-person mixer we had, the chamber had, I don't know if it's the case for you, was with the Cape May County Chamber on March 11th of last year. It was the last time we had an event, a live event. It's incredible that it's been almost a year. I miss seeing people face to face, but Vicki and I are certainly going to work on a virtual event, doing that together. So of course, everybody's welcome and invited. We hope you join us.
Absolutely. The next couple of things that we have coming up are a little more on the fun side. Next Wednesday, March 3rd, we're hosting a virtual whale watching tour. That's going to be 7 o'clock in the evening. We're partnering with Oceana and an organization called BAPAC, Business Alliance for the Protection of the Atlantic Coast, bringing awareness to the fragility of our ocean waters and our environmentally coastline and all of the aquatic animals that live in our ocean waters. We got involved with this organization when we were fighting the offshore oil issue, which never goes away, but right now is not as much on the forefront as it has been in the past. We'd love to have all of you join us. One of our great members, the Cape May Whale Watcher, is actually doing the tour. So you can sign up on our webpage, capemaycountychamber.com. And then also on Friday night, March 5th, we're doing a virtual wine tasting dinner with Cape May Winery. So those are the next two events coming up. We'd love to have you join us. And as always, we thank our partner, Cooper Levinson, for hosting and sponsoring today's educational session. So thank you all. Have a good rest of your week, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.